Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Today's Go Global webinar. The series continues and we're all about doing business, as it says, online, doing business online in Latin America. Well, thank you for joining us. The webinar will be commencing in 3 minutes time. Today we're going to be learning from our experts how to use offline and online tools to boost sales, nurture your brand, and grow your business in Latin America. And we're going to be presenting on business opportunities, the focus on major markets, online environment, e-commerce, and m-commerce, and how does a localized website boost your sales. Search engine optimization in those markets, online tools for your local distributors, and how can businesses use social media across Latin America? We have case studies and best practices of successful exporters. We have reporting and analyzing and a lot more. And the webinar will be beginning shortly. So thank you for joining us. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. It is time to get started. It is the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us. The Go Global webinar series continues. And today it's all about doing business online in Latin America. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to be presenting to you on how to use offline and online tools to boost your sales, nurture your brands, and grow your businesses through Latin America. Right, let's get started. And welcome to those of you who are joining us from the US. A very good day to you. Good morning. Those of you in Europe, a good afternoon to you. And those of you from the Middle East, well, a good evening. And thank you for joining us. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the very many of you who tune in to these webinars, which we record and put online and so are available on demand. So wherever you are, whatever time of day or night it is, you are welcome. My name is John Worthington. I am CEO here at IBT Online, and I'm your host here today, and I have the huge pleasure of introducing our Go Global webinar series. And today we're all about doing business online in Latin America. We're passionate about our Go Global webinar series. It is all about knowledge and understanding in this fast, ever-changing and moving online and international world. There's always lots to learn and to keep up to date, and today's Go Global webinar is just a great example. It's understanding how to do successful business online in Latin America. Now, before we get going, we always do a little housekeeping so you know what to expect from our Go Global webinar series. And for those of you who are returning, well, welcome back. You know the drill. You know that this webinar is one of our series. It's a series all about helping you to grow your sales, your brands, and your businesses globally. The Go Global webinar series is now over 4 years old. Yes, indeed. And so there is a rich catalog of recorded webinars available to you on demand, covering markets and routes to markets and ways to be successful online. If you go to www.ibt/US and resources, there you go, it's there marked for you. You can see the backlog of webinars. Also, of course, we're excited about our webinars coming forward, and we've got webinars planned for you over the next 3, 4, 5 months. So if you want to see what's coming up, go to that same URL and you can search out the webinars to come. Today's webinar, well, it's going to be about 45 minutes long, with a brief introduction that's right now by myself before I hand over to my expert colleagues. There will be 3 polls. So we will be asking you to be ready to participate. Your participation and feedback is so useful to us, and we can share that with all of today's attendees. There will be time for your questions, so you can see there on the screen. Please go to that question box, click it open, submit your questions, and if we can't get to your questions today, we will be following up and answering them in the future. There is, of course, a chat box. Now, please use it. Share with us your ideas and your thoughts. Also, at the end of this webinar, there will be a brief Doing Business Online in Latin America survey. Now, please do complete this. Again, it helps us to serve you better, and I hope that it brings you yet more valuable information. And finally, we are pleased to be able to tell you that today we will be, of course, recording this webinar, and on Friday, you will receive an email with a link to the prepared and curated webinar recording for today's webinar of Doing Business Online in Latin America. Now, let's get started as I present my co-presenters. Here we go. On the screen, you should be able to see 3 experts. In the middle, Susanna Hardy. Susanna is IBT Online's Chief Content Officer, and in that capacity has taken leadership for this successful online global webinar series. Susanna is responsible for all of our digital media and multi-channel publications. Susanna brings together and creates a huge wealth of international online research and knowledge that is then made available to you on our website and through our social media channels. Do go and check them out. Check out IBT Online's white papers, our ebooks, our infograms and videos, and of course, these webinars. They're all there for one purpose. They're dedicated to helping you grow your sales, your brands, and your business online and globally. And today's Latin America is a great example. Susanna has spent her career working in international business. She's worked over in the United States, that's in the US, as well as in France, Paris, and Germany, and the United Kingdom. Susanna is very multinational, speaking German, French, Dutch, and English. Now, on the right of your screen, Maria. Maria is one of IBT Online's website project managers and is responsible for the coordination of our teams, making sure we meet our clients' online goals and deadlines and that we exceed their expectations. Maria, as you can see, is a digital native, is an expert in project management, building technically challenging websites, coordinating teams around the globe, creating and managing digital marketing campaigns, and has a strong background in digital and corporate communications. Maria, like all members of the IBT Online team, is multicultural. She has also an impressive knowledge and speaks languages like Catalan, Spanish, English, and French. And this year alone in 2018 has delivered over 40 websites for our clients, most of those in Latin America. On the left of your screen, Samantha. Samantha is an IBT Online Business Development Manager. Samantha is an extreme case of digital nativism. She has for many years been both for work and pleasure, is always online using platforms and applications and social media for buying and selling. Samantha is based in IBT Online's office in wonderful Miami, Florida. And guess what? That is the gateway to Latin America. Samantha is another of IBT Online's team of young millennial digital natives and is also an expert in international business development. Samantha has a multinational background, is an Argentinian American, completing her master's at the International Business in Florida. Samantha has traveled widely, including, of course, across Latin America, speaking both English and Spanish. So with that, I'd like to conclude and talk about IBT Online. Just 2 words about us as a company. We're a privately held US and European company. IBT stands for International Business and Technologies. We've been in business since 2002. Yes, since 2002, that's 16 years. We've come a long way, and I'm proud to say so, with our clients and thanks to our clients, helping them online. We're proud of our International Trade Award-winning online global program, which combines website localization, and international online marketing. To date, we've served over 400 companies and over 1,000 online global programs. So that's all about selling online, measurable sales, brand, and business growth for our clients in all of the world's major markets. And of course, that includes Latin America. IBT Online, we understand the challenges faced by companies exporting and growing internationally, and our solutions, the online global solution that we'll be presenting today, we hope will be helping you in the very near future. So with that, my colleagues, thank you very much. Susanna, are you there?
Yes, John. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for the introduction, John. A real pleasure to talk about Latin America and doing business in Latin America, online and offline. So our agenda today is really going to give, the first part is going to give a sort of landscape, an overview of the Latin America scene, both for the business scene, both sort of a couple of snapshots of what we have found to be the most important elements when doing business in Latin America on and offline. And then we're going to drill down and look at the Latin American website specifics. How they're built, in what way, which markets, and so on. Then focus a little bit on social media in Latin America. That's a huge subject on its own. So I've really curated some of our material. We have done separate webinars just on social media in Latin America. So that's a big subject. And then fourthly, we're going to give you some case studies and real life examples to show you the kind of things companies are doing today, exporters are doing to use websites to really boost their sales in the region. So without further ado, let's talk about Latin America on and offline. Now, some of the basics. The continent of Latin America is always been called sort of one of huge potential. And it does seem to us, as well as it has also reached a bit of a tipping point. It's now become sort of that, from that endless sort of talk about huge potential, it has actually now really arrived in many of the countries. And we'll get into that a bit later. It is very much a mosaic. There are 33 countries in total, 600 million people. There's a lot that unifies this huge continent. And this huge natural resources and things like that. That also means it can be prone to boom and bust economies. But again, I think that this is something that we're seeing changing a little bit over time. The countries are becoming economically a lot more stable as they diversify their economies, and a lot of that has to do with online technologies. Now, just some quick facts and figures, and again, these are things that we wanted to highlight that come across most importantly when you're building websites and looking at digital marketing in these countries. The first is that the population is very concentrated. In almost all the countries, it is dominated by the urban population in a few major cities. Latin America, the southern continent, is the most urbanized continent in the world, with 80% living in cities. And that's I think quite a sort of strong thing to have in the back of your mind when you're thinking about doing business there and thinking about doing websites in the area. The second characteristic that we wanted to highlight as well is the rising trade in Asia, or from Asia, with Asia. Today, the largest trading partner is clearly the USA. It has been for the last few years. But trade with Asia has been rising by double digit, up to like 20% per annum over the last 20 years. And Asia, particularly China, will be the largest single trading partner with most South American countries within a very short time. I wanted also to highlight the language. This is something we'll come back to when we delve into the websites themselves. Most people in Southern America speak Spanish or Portuguese, but you can see on that map just a huge number of other languages that exist. Some of them sort of French and Dutch, but some of them also Navajo and Quechua and other Native American and Native American Indian and Latin American indigenous languages. So worth having in mind as well. Now, a couple of things we talked about, that the Latin America has become increasingly wealthy and increasingly stable. than it was in the past. I wanted to bring you up here a little slide just showing the main countries and their GDP by purchasing power parity. You can see Brazil and Mexico leading by quite a long way. So there's, you know, very, very strong advantages and good things happening there in terms of investments, the free trade agreements, skilled labor forces. They have that, but there does remain quite a few problems. In particular, social instability and continued reliance on commodities, which, as I said earlier, does lead to a slight sort of boom and bust sort of, or can lead to a boom and bust economy cycle. Now, what's interesting is how the web has really got into Latin America, changed people's lives, and changed the way people are doing, the way business is being done in these countries. Let's look first just about the web overall. Digital around the world, as we know, over 4 billion people are now online all the time in the world. And the vast majority of them, you know, 3/4 of them, are using social media all the time as well. And you're going to get these numbers. I mean, obviously for the Americas, it's a similar sort of number, as you see from this slide. This combines both North and South America, about 1 billion people, and about 71%, so over 2/3, are using the internet on a very consistent, regular basis, and 60% are on social media. These numbers are worth bearing in mind. They're pretty similar to what you find throughout Latin America, or the more industrialized parts of Latin America. Let's go through now and just look at some of the major characteristics that we can find throughout Latin America. The first one is regards search engines. Google is by far the dominant search engine, and it's I guess it's sort of worth thinking about. You know, you don't have to deal with other search engines that are more specific or more localized, for example, Yandex in Russia, or Baidu, the big Baidu in China. So Google is probably something you're going to have a lot of familiarity with from your home domestic market. You can see the market share there in the table. Across Latin America, it's way over 90% market share. Now, one thing about Google in Latin America is that it is very different from Google in the United Kingdom or Google in the United States. Not only is it in Spanish or Portuguese, it's in Colombian Spanish, Mexican Spanish, Argentinian Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, not Portuguese Portuguese. So it is language specific. It is specific also to the market. And this is where we're going to get into this whole notion of a localized website and of localizing your web presence in order to boost your sales and your exports in these markets. And the best way that I can figure this out and demonstrate this in a short slide really is to go back to some of the basics and say, how do search engines actually work? Search engines like Google are localized. In other words, they take the client, the searcher, at the center. They say, we are going to be market specific and client focused. So I'm specific to my market, Argentina or Brazil or Mexico or wherever it is that the searcher sits. And I'm going to take the searcher's point of view, the client's point of view. So I'm market specific and I'm client focused. It's like having lots of different Googles across the world. So don't think that just because you're ranking well in the United States means that you rank well anywhere else. Most likely, if you don't have a website in those other markets, you're not even present in those other markets on the web, unless you have a specific URL. So unless someone actually knows all about you already and knows your website address, you're not going to be found. You're basically invisible. So this is, I think, the first thing we have to realize when looking at business in Latin America, is that it's not good enough. It doesn't work to simply add some Spanish or Portuguese pages to your existing US website or UK or German website and hope that someone in Brazil or Colombia are going to find you. They won't. You have to actually have a localized presence because, as I said, Google is localized. Now, what is website localization? We've had lots of webinars just on this topic, but I wanted to list the major characteristics that we have, and there are 10 that we break down for a localized website. And here I've just listed them, but you can see out of this list that language is only one of the 10 characteristics. So fully adapted to local language, that's 1 out of 10. The other aspects are things like hosting locally, optimized for the local search engine, the correct software that you're building it on, so the CMS, the regulatory requirements, all of these things play into the website localization. You have to get all 10 of those ingredients right in your local market, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Mexico, in order to be a well-built, well-established, easy-to-find company. Easy to find, easy to be understood, easy to do business with. Because what you want to do is you want to do business with the local person, and therefore you have to do business on their terms, to be found how they want to find you, when they want to find you, and how they want to find you. So that's the next thing that we're going to be talking about. Perhaps we have time for a quick poll. John, do we have time for a quick poll?
Oh, here we go. Please, everybody, we love this moment. We're launching our first poll today for today's webinar. So here you go. Please tell us about it. We're keen to share it with everybody that's attending. What are your 2 top export destinations for Latin America? How about Mexico and Central America? How about Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, other? Let me give you some feedback. It is really interesting to be able to read and tell you that I'm getting 75% are saying Mexico and Central America, a good 40% are saying Brazil, 38% are saying Colombia, and 25% are saying Chile, Argentina, and 6% are saying other. That's very interesting. Look, thank you for that information. Really, this helps us do better going forward. So we'll be sharing that information back with you. And what I'm going to do now is close this poll and hand it back to Susanna. Susanna, thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We will actually be able to then tailor. I mean, you're going to see some slides further on about specifically Mexico and Brazil. We'll tailor the presentation a bit more towards that in that case. I want now to talk about some of the generalities of Latin American websites. Sort of the big characteristics that we see again and again, whether that's Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, or other. So for example, the first major characteristic that you'll see again and again is that these are mobile first markets. Now what this means is that very often the first time someone accesses the web and the first time and the main way they go onto the internet is via their smartphone. Now, smartphones were only introduced in 2007, but it had a profound effect on how people do business in places like South America and Latin America. There was limited broadband, so smartphones become a real business tool. It's similar to what you see across the world in other global first markets, whether that's Southeast Asia or India, even in some respects China. If you discover and work on to access the internet via your mobile phone, then it stands to reason that the websites you make have to be very mobile enabled, not just able to be seen on a mobile, but actually totally enabled. That means mobile at the center of the design, mobile at the center of the whole thought of how you're producing the website. So that's the first thing to keep in mind there in terms of your takeaway. Mobile 4G now reaches about 60% of the population of Latin America, and it's still growing. There's a lot of reports about sort of the penetration rates continuing to rise. Many people have more than one phone as well. So the first big takeaway is mobile first. It's very much a mobile first economy and a mobile first environment for your websites. The second big takeaway really has to do with sociable. It is across Latin America. These are very, very sociable markets. In other words, they use social media a lot, and they use them in very specific ways. We'll get down to some of the details in a moment in another part of the presentation. But I thought this was quite interesting. It's sort of, why do you access the internet? And 80% of the people, this actually happens to be for Mexico, but it could be the same for Brazil or for Argentina. Why do you access the internet? Well, I access the internet for my social media. Now, if you were to do the same poll in the United States, yes, social media would rank very high, but not to such a high level of 80%. And if you're looking at sort of business information or getting or to look at for streaming videos or something, getting information, well, that's 60% or less in Latin America, and that's certainly not the case in more in the less I guess sociable markets like the U.S., like the U.K., like Europe. So the first point is why is it sociable? I think partly because the culture is very sociable. I'm always struck when I go into a Latin American country. You go into the elevator and everyone says hello. I live in the UK. Nobody says hello. You all stare at your feet. The second point is Latin Americans love apps. They adopt apps very quickly. You can see this by the number of apps they use, by the trending of it, by the companies moving apps into Latin America. Latin American internet users adopt and use apps very quickly. The third point here is that they probably historically trust their friends and family more than they do institutions. Which means if you want to have a view, if you want to get an opinion, if you want to get a news, then you might reach out to friends and family versus the government or an official channel. And that's, again, a reason why social media has such a strong dominant position across Latin America. Now, one of the big questions that we're asked about as well in Latin America is, well, can I just have like one website for all of Latin America? Or do I have to have one website for each one of these countries? This is something which I think is worth having a little bit of a drill down into, because it is very key to how you design your strategy. So I've asked Maria to give us some answers on this. And Maria, if you'd like to just hand over and talk about language or country specific websites.
Sure, thanks, Susanna. So as Susanna mentioned, one of the main questions that we normally get is, should our company target a specific country or target a region? The thing is that when the company decides to target the region, then it becomes a language-specific website. And this means that adding a region can be 3 or 4 different Latin American countries at the same time. The thing is that in an ideal world, you would have a website for every single country. This is the case, this is like Apple, for example, which has over 200 different separate country websites, and each one of those are localized specifically for each single country. But the thing is that we don't all have all the same resources as Apple, so we need to choose. And Latin America is typically a place where you have to choose whether to have a country-specific website or a language-specific website. The good news here is that there are the choices and they can both be quite effective. So here we have a diagram of how we would typically work with a company, whether they need a country-specific website or a language-specific website. Take Central America, for example. Central America is made up of many small nations, so it might make more sense to have one website to cover all the region. This would be a language-specific website. It would still be localized in all other ways, as Susanna mentioned, and it would be hosted locally with images that local people identify with, and obviously it would be mobile-friendly. But if the company is really targeting one specific country, let's say Chile, and there is enough traffic and potential market in this country, then it makes more sense to have a country-specific website just for Chile. If we have a look to this slide, yes, basically, yes, once you have decided your website strategy, whether if you are country focused from the beginning or language focused, then we would help you decide what kind of domain works better for you. The best option in terms of search engine optimization would be the first one, using a country code top level domain if you are country targeted, let's say .ar if you are targeting Argentina, or using a generic top-level domain if you decide to start targeting the region. In this case, it would be .lat. However, this option requires more budget and efforts in order to grow popularity on this new domain. The second option would be using subdirectories with generic top-level domains. These require less technical resources and budget, but need more efforts to geolocate. Following the example of Argentina, if you are country focused from the beginning, you might start using .com/AR. On the other side, if you start targeting the region .lat and then you consider to buy a new site localized for Argentina, then you can add /AR to the generic top-level domain .lat. The third alternative are the subdomains with generic top-level domains. This is really easy to set up, and it's better than the subdirectories if you need to organize larger and more complex sites. In this case, the structure would be AR yourbrand.yourbrand.com if you are country focused, and lat.yourbrand.com if you are language focused. All this said, the good news here is that you can tailor it over the time depending on your website strategy plan.
Maria, that's fantastic. And I'm always, when I see this, I'm always so glad that we have experts who know this sort of thing and can walk me through it and can decide and give us experienced views on what is the best for your strategy. I think the major thing to take away from this is that you can have either strategy, you can have choices. And the .lat, L-A-T, for the whole of Latin America, for a region of Latin America, is a fantastic solution if you're looking for a region. And as I said, I'm very glad that Maria is there to help us through this. Okay, I'd like also maybe Samantha, if you could tell us a little bit about some of the individual markets that some of our key listeners and key companies are looking at today.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to. So we are going to start with Brazil. Brazil being the largest economy in Latin America and also the largest country in Latin America. They have the ninth largest economy of the world, and they have the largest e-commerce largest in e-commerce sales in Latin America. So this is a market that has huge potential. It is very culturally diverse. It's one of the main obstacles with Brazil is that they speak Portuguese instead of Spanish. So someone trying to enter Brazil, you would need a localized website for specifically Brazil instead of how Maria was saying, kind of like a regional type of site. Something that is very interesting about Brazil is that they spend the third most amount of time on the internet. They spend about 9 hours and 14 minutes average on the internet per day. And that's very similar with their ranking and how much time they spend on social media as well. They are the second most time spent on social media in the entire world, right behind the Philippines. They spend about 3 hours and 39 minutes average daily on social media. So this to businesses should be music to your ears, because that means that this is an economy that has people who are very well connected, that they are receptive to the internet, and that they're talking to each other. So that means that you could talk to them as well. Moving on to the second largest economy in Latin America, Mexico, which is as we know from the poll before, is probably one of the most popular markets for exporters, because one of its proximity to the United States, and because of the trade agreements, and they are just a very import-export friendly country. They are the 15th largest economy in the world and the second largest economy in Latin America. They are also super well connected and very mobile and internet friendly, and they are also always on social media. So they pretty consistently rank in the top 10 countries in the world with time spent on social media and on the internet. they spend about 3 hours and 9 minutes a day on mobile internet, so through their mobile devices. And same thing for social media. They spend about 3 hours talking to each other, going on Facebook, going on Instagram, on WhatsApp, and talking to each other. And as you can see, 62% access social media every single day. So now going on into the other three main markets of main interest, sorry about that. Argentina being one of them, my home country, the third largest economy in Latin America. Argentina is also a very, very diverse country in its landscape and its people. They have 35 million internet users with a 78% penetration rate and 31 million on Facebook. They are also, Argentina is also another country that spends a ton of time on social media. They spend 3 hours and 9 minutes on social media. They spend the fifth most amount of time in the world, right behind Thailand and in front of Egypt and actually Mexico. So they are also very well connected and they love to talk to each other. Chile is right beside it. They share a beautiful mountain range. They have a very attractive market for e-commerce. Chile is one of the few countries that really pushes. They really push and try to teach English, which is something really nice for exporters, knowing that if they attract people with a Spanish localized website, that they can communicate with Chileans in English. And another great thing about Chile is that they are also very well connected with 12 million people on Facebook. Then there's Colombia, the fifth largest economy in Latin America. They have 28.5 million internet users with a little over half penetration rate, which is great because that leaves a lot of room for improvement, and that's something that Colombia is definitely trying to do. And 26 million of them are on Facebook. So what this slide should tell you is that these three countries, along with Mexico and Brazil, all of these countries are very well connected, and they are at your fingertips to be able to connect with, to sell to, and to do business with.
Wow. Samantha, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And Maria, before that, what a learning curve. Thank you so much, which brings us to poll number 2. Please, everybody, it's me again, and it's poll time. I'm launching poll number 2. Here we go. It's all about, do you have localized websites for your export markets? Well, as Samantha was saying there, and she was talking through what needs to happen in each market. So is it yes, all of our main export markets? Yes, but only a few. Are you thinking about it, or is the answer no? Right, let me give you some feedback from poll number 2, this localized website. So a thumping 40% are saying thinking about it, 20% are saying no, 7% are saying yes in all of their main export markets. So I'd say that bravo to you guys. And also 14% are saying yes in a few. So you guys are well on the road. Well, we hope that today's information and today's insights will encourage you to do what is necessary to be successful online in these markets, and that we can be helpful in that process. So I'm going to close the second poll. I'm going to hand back to today's expert presenters, and thank you very much for sharing your views on that question. Thank you.
Fantastic. This leads us straight well into the social media aspects of Latin America, and we can have a look sort of in a broad landscape brush of it. It is a fascinating topic, and one which can be very rewarding for companies looking to build the businesses there. I thought I'd just start really with a sort of a diagram. This is how in a sense, I see anyway, social media and the role of social media in today's business world. I guess in the past, there's a bit of a simplification, but most relationships for a company were bilateral. They were one-on-one relationship. You had a one-on-one relationship with a customer, with your partners, or probably no relationship with your competitor, sort of thing. But today's world is far more complex. It is customer-centric. So the customer is at the center of that, and interacts with all the different players on the board, whether that's your competitors, your partners, other customers, and obviously you as a company. And this is as true for B2B as it is for B2C. The role of social media really is to try and influence those arrows, to try and shape and influence what is being said between customer to customer, customer to partners, and customer to the company. Today, a company is working well when its customers, B2B, B2C, or even B2 government, are saying favorable things about them. People go on and they search online, and then they look at testimonials, they look at what people are saying about that company, they look at reviews, all kinds of things before making a purchase. And that's really the role of social media. In Latin America, as I think we've tried to show before about how sociable it is, how online and how mobile it is, that whole diagram there on the right-hand side is extremely relevant for how one does business in Latin America, and why the internet is such a fantastic, and websites are such a fantastic tool to have for a business looking to grow business sales, brands, and exports to Latin America. So a quick, I think you've definitely gotten the view as well, Facebook rules. That's clear from Samantha's discussion of those countries. And indeed, I wanted to sort of highlight a little bit, in terms of social media penetration. First of all, it is slightly below, if you look at the entire continent, it's below what is for North America. North America is about 70, and in South America about 63%, in Central America a bit lower. But if you go city by city, and if you take out some of the countries that are perhaps of lesser interest, this is, for individual problems, like, particularly Venezuela, you actually boost it quite a bit more, as we've seen from those individual slides that Samantha was having. On the right-hand slide, that graph, or that map, sorry, of North and South America really shows the difference between Facebook and WhatsApp. Now, I said Facebook rules throughout all those markets, but the #1 messaging app is WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is used as well for companies, for individuals and companies to talk to each other about other companies and about things. So people use a messaging app like WhatsApp as group chat forums. It's not uncommon to find people in South America with 30 or 40 different WhatsApp groups. There'll be a business WhatsApp group, a competitor WhatsApp group, a school one. All kinds of parts to your life will have a different group for the WhatsApp, and you're looking and searching and talking about things in that group. And that again is something that you could try and influence with social media. Facebook has spent a lot of time on Latin America. Mexico is its 3rd largest market. Brazil is its 4th largest market in the world. So these are very important markets, and they're growing fast. One of the things that's really interesting as well with regards to Latin America is the cost. The cost per click, which is generally how one looks at costs of online international marketing. I give you some examples here with Brazil, Mexico, Germany, and the UK. This is a real life example of a campaign we're currently doing for a client of ours in those 4 different markets. Pretty well the same, a very similar campaign on 4 different markets that the client is interested in running those campaigns, and those are the different prices, cost per click, demanded by Facebook. So as you can see, Mexico and Brazil are very cheap. They're very, very well priced. They're very interesting prices for social media advertising. So that's worth having in mind as well. And the graph here just shows the number of Facebook users expected in Latin America. They're expected to be about 270 million Facebook users by the end of this year. And that seems to be on target at the moment. And obviously, Facebook owns WhatsApp and Instagram. So if you were to combine those three platforms together, you would really be covering a huge spectrum of social media. Now, there's one thing, again, that we had to look back on with regards to social media. Just as we talked about localizing your website, you need to localize your social media. Social media has to be market-specific, client-focused. Just like the search engines, therefore your websites, therefore your social media. This is an example of keywords that you can find in Portugal or Brazil. It means the same thing. The word for train in Portugal is comboio, and in Brazil it's trem. If you get the keyword wrong and you're targeting Brazil and you use comboio, which is the Portuguese word for train, about 5% of people in Brazil will actually find you. So you're really, if you're using the wrong keywords, you are really, with fighting in the market with one hand tied behind your back. You're really disguising yourself and making it hard to find you. This is a good example of how important it is to find the right keywords and localize them in each market. So just like we said, search engines are localized, therefore your websites are localized, so your social media and online international marketing has to be localized. So we're running quickly now. I just wanted to sort of group together the main takeaways of the social media side and of the online side. It is a mobile-first market throughout all of Latin America. It's this very reactive and sociable market. You put a click out there, or you put an ad out there, they'll click on it. It is relatively cheap, certainly compared to the USA, to the Middle East, to Europe. It has very good engagement. As I said, they respond. You ask them to click on this. Do you like my product? Yes, we like your product. The challenge that we have found is the conversion. You can get a lot of people liking something. How do you then get them to really say, yes, I will actually buy this? Not just in B2C, but in B2B. That's even trickier. And that comes with sustained building of brand and trust. It comes over time, working it and localizing it. If someone trusts you, then they buy. In order to have that trust, they need to feel that you are localized, that you understand their local market, that you're committed to the local market, and that you have a strong presence. You can do that with websites and social media. And then finally, the last is that there is a developing e-commerce. It is fast growing. There's a lot of challenges, and we have a separate webinar just on that topic. So if we have time.
Susanna, thank you so much for that insight. Very, very interesting information, and that enables me to say poll number 3. Here we go on the very subject of social media. Brilliant information. Thank you for sharing that with us. And therefore, please, today's attendees, what do you think about social media to promote your company? Are you doing this? Is it yes in home markets and export markets, or home markets and some key markets, only in home market, or are you thinking about it, or is the answer no? We can see the crucial importance and rising importance of social media there. So let me tell you what I'm getting back. A solid 75% are saying they're doing it in their home market. That is awesome. That is a great number. And 14% are saying we are doing this in some of the key export markets. There's also 7% saying thinking about it, and 7% as well saying no. Well, look, we hope that these presentations, this information is going to encourage you to be successful leveraging social media in these markets. And with that, I'm going to close the third and final poll, and thank you again for participating in the polls, and handing back to Susanna.
Yeah, we're looking at, just wanted to give you some exporter case studies and some next steps. I'm going to ask Samantha to do that. And then I've just seen that there are quite a few questions, and so I'm going to leave a little bit of time. So Samantha, you've got a little bit of time there, and then we can do some questions, I hope. So Samantha, would you like to go through the case studies, please?
Yeah, sounds good. Excellent. So the first case study is a Florida company called ASG Avionics Support Group. And what's important to keep in mind throughout these case studies is that, we know that each company is different. Each company has their own way of doing business and exporting. So the localized websites kind of shift and morph depending on what the company's goals and expectations are. So ASG did all of their exporting through partners and distributors, and they have been trying to enter the China market for about 2 years. They had a salesperson there who was great at selling, but he didn't really quite understand or wasn't able to portray the technical aspects as great as they would have liked. So they participated in a program that we have here in Florida, and we created localized websites first in China and Mexico, and then in Japan and Brazil. But in China specifically, it acted as a tool for the salesperson to give to the technical people in the airlines to better understand ASG and what they did and their products. And they actually got a $500,000 deal with an airlines there because of these localized websites. So for them, they use websites for lead generation, and because of all of these localized websites, their exports grew from $2.5 to $5 million. Going on to the next case study, which is Ocean Optics. Ocean Optics is a global company. However, they found that their business in Mexico and Brazil was kind of lacking. It was falling behind their other markets. So they were trying to figure out other ways to engage with potential customers and potential businesses. So they reached out to us, and we created localized websites in Mexico and Brazil. And they have been trying to use social media to kind of back up these websites to have that lead generation into their localized websites. Moving on to VaporPin. So VaporPin is an interesting case study because they were actually they were trying to localize their e-commerce platform and their website for Brazil with a web firm that creates websites, but they weren't really up to par for the localization, for the process of localization. And VaporPins wasn't too happy with the way that the e-commerce platform was looking, and the Brazilian Portuguese that they were using wasn't actually Brazilian Portuguese. So they reached out to us, and we created this localized e-commerce platform for Brazil and a localized website. What's important to keep in mind is that Brazil is a very difficult market to enter for e-commerce, but it is possible. Obviously, VaporPin's doing it, and a bunch of other companies are as well. But if you can export to Brazil, you can pretty much export to anywhere. And those are three of the many phenomenal case studies that we have. We really encourage you to check out a few of our testimonial videos if you go through that link. We've worked with B2C companies, B2B companies, B2G. We really try to tip and tail these websites to the specific needs of the companies to make sure that they deliver for what your goals are and what your expectations are. So please check those out, and we would be happy to have a conversation with you.
Thanks, Samantha. That's great. Just a quick overview of some of the companies. And as Samantha said, we have a lot of testimonials on our websites as well that you can see the clients actually talking about it, and that way it'll help make it more real. I just wanted to put this last slide up just to say, where we are in terms of localized websites, localized social media. For us, it's at its simplest. It's the best way we have for companies to be found in their export markets and to be understood, and therefore to be trusted, and therefore to do business in these international markets. So our view is, quite simple: get online. Now, John, I hope there's some questions out there, and I hope there's some time left for us to be answering questions. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Susanna, there's a stack of questions, so I'm going to pull out a few. I'm not going to let Samantha rest. I'm going to say, Samantha, here, this one must come to you. What are the first steps in getting localized websites? You've got a whole load of experience, Samantha, there. So what is the first steps? How do you start?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I would say the first step is to really understand what your goals are, what your objectives are, which markets you would like to go into, what is your end goal of having these localized websites, because it can be anything from having brand recognition, establishing trust, to the lead generation and increasing sales. So I think the first step is to have a really clear picture of what you want to do, and then the next step is, I mean, you can get in contact with us, and we'll make sure to go through the localization process to deliver for your goals.
Samantha, thank you for that, and that's great. That's very clear, and I'm sure very helpful. As going to grab question number 2 and say, Susanna, I think this one's quite kind of relevant to issues of content. And would these guys obviously have distributors in market, and would their own localized website conflict with their in-market distributors? I like that question. What do you do there?
Well, we actually, a lot of our clients, a lot of our companies that we work with have in-market partners, and we don't see a conflict at all. On the contrary, these things are very complementary. This is basically giving the distributor the best possible sales tool you can give him. It's in his own language, it's localized for his market. It really allows him to showcase your products when he's on tour, when he's generating leads, and then it allows him to focus on his business, which is closing deals, getting supplies, doing after sales, whatever it is your distributor does for you in that local, or your market partner does for you in that market. I would say as well, if your distributor is doing all of your web stuff, if he is running your online presence, then you really have to wonder where your brand is going to go. It's tricky. If you're handing someone over your online presence in that market, they kind of have a pretty good stranglehold on your brand, and that is not something that is a desirable thing in the long term. So careful on that. Much better have your own website that your distributor can use, but you have control. Same thing with the social media. That's in our experience.
Interesting, and experience, as you say, experience tells a lot. Maria, let's get back into building websites, and this one is about safety in Latin America. How safe is it? Should we be worried about safety?
No, definitely not, John. It is worth mentioning that we normally use US website companies to do the hosting. This helps actually protecting against hacking, as there are lots of safeguards in place. Obviously, no one is totally safe against hackers and data breach, but we have a good experience so far working with these kind of companies. Also, we try to make sure that we keep updated on the safety policies. So I would say that there's nothing to worry about it.
Thank you very much. And linked to that, I have a question. Jen is saying, are there any digital privacy or data rules for Latin America? And what about compliance? Well, Susanna, I'll hand that back to you as CCO there.
That's very topical, very on trend. At the moment, in Latin American countries, there is nothing similar to the European GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. But so it's more similar to the US in terms of a sort of much more sort of fluid, less obvious protection. But a lot of these countries are watching this space very carefully, and Cambridge Analytica had a lot of operations in Latin America, and there's a lot of investigations going on now about Cambridge Analytica's influence on certain elections. There's a growing movement across Latin America, particularly in Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Brazil, so the big four, to say we need to have something similar to what the Europeans are doing in GDPR. So in other words, get ahead of the regulations, make sure you're on top of them. All the websites we do would be GDPR compliant in any case, since that is the best in class at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Susanna, for that. We are running out of time, so I'm going to be saying last question. There are more, so please do know we'll be getting back to you individually. I've got one here, Samantha. It's social media, and it's can we use one campaign for several countries? That is Jake asking that question. What's your answer?
Jake, that's a great question. Okay, so it just depends. So social media is even more localized, or should be even more localized than websites, because you're speaking directly to your customers. And it is possible if you're doing organic. If you're doing organic social media and posting, you just have to be very aware of the words that you're using and making sure that it's not, one word in Spanish in one country means something completely different in another country. So you just have to be very sensitive to those things. However, if you are using paid marketing, if you're going to do a campaign through Facebook and paid marketing, Facebook only allows you to target one country for one campaign at a time. So if you can do the same campaign in various countries, you just kind of have to pay for it separately. So it is possible, but you just have to be very sensitive to the culture and the language and everything.
Samantha, thank you. I love that technical response and that insight. Well, look, what I'd like to say now is we really are running out of time. We're a little over time, but I want to bring this Doing Business Online in America webinar to an end, and I want to thank everyone for participating today. We hope that you all enjoyed the webinar. We hope that you found lots of useful information and that it encourages you to start or further develop your business in Latin America. At IBT Online, we do understand the challenges that you face in doing business in Latin America. And as we tried to present today, there are solutions here to help you ensure your success in growing your exports, your sales, your brands, and your businesses across Latin America. Don't forget, on Friday, we will be sending you the slide deck. So watch out for that in your inbox. And I would like to now have a round of applause. This is on behalf of everybody in the audience for Susanna, Maria, and Samantha. Thank you so much. Please stay online and answer the survey. And we thank you for joining us and look forward to the next webinar in due course. Thank you very much and have a great day. And the survey is with you now.